crafts and mental health. Hi, I'm Simon, a counsellor based online or in Oxford, and I enjoy crafts. The footage on the right is taken from a crafting holiday. You can watch all of the snippets in the crafting playlist on my channel, and they outline how to make each item whilst also talking about mental health. And the footage on the left is a little bit more of a real-time clip of me making a paper brain. For me, I find the immersion and flow from crafting really helps with my mental well-being. So I wanted to ask the question, do crafts help with mental health? In this video I've looked at the literature to see if there are studies on this question, and then the rest of this video is really theorising why crafts might be good for our emotional well-being. I found a few studies, including a really helpful meta-review that looked at themes from various other papers between 1995 and 2007 to pull all the stats together, and generally talks about the positive impacts of crafting. I wanted to focus on a more recent paper though. Last August, Helen Keyes and her colleagues analysed the Taking Part survey that used data from between 2019 and 2020. This survey questioned 7,182 adults in the UK, and it analysed loneliness, anxiety, life satisfaction and purpose. They also asked if people have done creative arts and crafts, which they very helpfully abbreviated to CAC, within the last year. Then they did some fancy maths to make sure that things like age, gender, whether or not you've got a job and how rough your street are, aren't impacting on the results. What they found was that this CAC was a predictor of what they called subjective well-being, relative to respondents who are not CACing. And that also applied when you factored in those socio-economic factors I mentioned, like whether or not we've got a job. To summarise some of the findings from this study, CAC is 1.6 times more likely to make you feel that your life is worthwhile than your employment status, which is just massive. In other words, an unemployed person who crafts is 60% more likely to feel that they have meaning in their lives than an employed person who doesn't. All of the following are statistically significant at p equals 0.001, meaning the data is not fluked or just by chance, and that we're 99.9% sure that we can trust the results of the following statistics. That 16.4% of the variance in life satisfaction was attributed to CAC, that CAC predicted 11.2% of the variance in how worthwhile life felt, and that CAC predicted 10.6% of the variance in happiness. All of this meant that CAC had more of an impact on well-being than how deprived the area you live is, of whether or not you're employed, or of aging 20 years. So we should take note of this study, because taking up an arts and crafts hobby is so much more available than moving to a rich area, landing a dream job, or of getting 20 years younger. So the rest of this video is going to look at some of the things that might be going on for us whilst we're crafting, so we can get some insights into why that might be helping with our mental health. Firstly, mindfulness. Mindfulness is more than just meditation, and can include body exercises such as movement or eating. Mindfulness is all about being in touch with our present moment experience, whatever that looks like. And that can include our breath, our body sensations, our feelings, our thoughts, and what we're doing. For some folks, especially if we're neurodiverse such as in ADHD, meditation can be too intense. And so something using the hands can be grounding, but also anchor us in the present moment. And this is where crafts come in. Crafting has been shown to have similar effects to meditation at separating us off from stressors. The focus on the craft and the repetitive nature of it is meditative, without trying to multitask on many demands like the busyness and stimulation modern life presents us with. Furthermore, meditative exercises build tolerance to our individual experience, which aids with loneliness or emotional intensity that can often aggravate our mental health. And there's a name for this meditative immersion that takes us away from stress in our life, Which brings us on to our second point, flow state. Flow state is similar to hyperfocus, or being really captivated by a special interest, and research has shown that some key components to reaching a state of flow include creativity and being challenged. However, the challenge must feel as though it's manageable rather than overwhelming, and crafts enable this organically. They take up our brain and body thinking about the activity, but it's not so stressful that the state of flow is blocked by the difficulty. Flow state is great at not just distracting and focus, but people who experience it report a sense of confidence and almost ego death, as they know what they are doing, they know who they are, but also there's a sense of purposefulness and momentary escape from the thinking mind. And this can really equip people with a confidence and presence that can linger outside of the activity into their day. The third reason crafts work is a distraction from negative self-talk, trauma and pain. Flow state or mindfulness provide a distraction from this negative self-talk or pain, which are all present in the moment, but they sort of fade like background music into the experience of crafting as we passively observe these things rather than them being overwhelming or growing into this huge disturbing thing. A meta-review from 1995 to 2007 of articles on crafts and mental health beautifully said, "Art can be a refuge from the intense emotions associated with illness." One study did crafts such as basketry, pottery and woodwork with soldiers who were experiencing shell shock, another name for PTSD. With trauma, we can get stuck in a loop of trying to avoid the triggering traumatic memories, alongside vivid and often quite visceral flashback reminders of those traumas. And these activities acted as a diversional strategy away from the trauma, the pain of their injuries, or negative thought patterns, which give a kind of aesthetic distance enough to build tolerance to those things. Another study in a hospital was looking at pain and recovery post-surgery, and they found that patients who were able to engage with arts and crafting during their stay had statistically shorter stays in hospital. There was a study in Oxford that looked at playing the video game Tetris to help protect against traumatic responses after a road traffic accident. And there was another study that looked at people who were journaling for 15 to 30 minutes a day, using either poetry or emotional writing on traumatic information. And it reduced GP visits, it improved immune function, it reduced stress, and this continued across cultures as well. What I'm trying to say is this distraction from the negative, it's not just a break, it actually helps to reduce the intensity of painful physical, emotional, traumatic or mental symptoms that can really weigh on our mental health. And that distraction that we feel can actually begin to persist, so those things aren't quite as bothersome. My fourth point is on achievements and challenging limiting self-beliefs. Remember those shell-shocked soldiers doing their basketry? Well, crafts weren't just a diversion. Those soldiers also started to feel a sense of hope and even accomplishment because they were learning new skills and learning them even when they're afflicted with trauma. You see, mental health can be quite sticky and difficult to escape from. We are desperate for a life raft, and short-term gratification, the stuff that immediately makes us feel a tiny bit better, things like junk food, booze, scrolling through TikTok, that can be an awful lot more tempting than delayed gratification, than things that bring a deeper contentment than that immediate stimulation. Crafts possess a level of immediate enjoyment, being much less pressure to set up than other tasks that might give us a sense of accomplishment. But they still give us that anticipatory reward of working towards finishing a project, and this ultimately is more fulfilling than the instantly gratifying bouts of pleasure that we can so easily acclimatise to. This same sense of accomplishment can also really help challenge self-beliefs and labels that we put on ourselves when our mental health is struggling. Things like, I'm a loser, or I'm never going to change. Instead, creating something allows us to realise our inner creativity and our capacity to both grow and change. We challenge beliefs that we may have internalised early on in school, such as, I'm no good at art, by sticking with the process until we've made something and begin to find pride in that thing that we've made. This accomplishment also opens up avenues to other areas which really nurture our self-belief, our hope and our capacity to grow. This isn't quite craft related, but I remember when I was in year 11 learning how to play chess, and for some reason I thought I wasn't clever enough to learn it. I thought the rules were too complicated, and a real eureka moment that, gosh, if I can learn to use this really difficult game, then maybe I can learn other things. It's the same with crafts. We accomplish something by making it, and that opens doors to other things. Point 5. Purpose and meaning making. The meta-review I mentioned earlier found that an awful lot of folks turn to visual arts after getting a cancer diagnosis as a way of meaning making, of self-expression, and in order to construct a positive identity in the wake of huge existential information, such as a serious and potentially terminal medical condition. As a counsellor, I try to work using my clients' language in their process. Some of them process very emotionally, some somatically, others more with content, and some with creativity, such as metaphor or art. I'm often struck by clients that bring metaphor, or media, such as a film or game. They bring those to talk about issues in their lives. You see, when we allow that metaphor, that picture, that film, that musical piece, whatever it might be, to speak to us, there's often a rich and valuable meaning that emerges from it in a way that we might struggle to reach if we were just rationalising. Point 6. Self-expression and creativity. Related to meaning making, crafts are much freer from rules and physical restrictions than reality. We may be able to draw with a rich symbolism that just isn't possible to describe in the same way narratively, and it enables us to express difficult things such as grief somatically with the hands without the limits that we might have if we weren't doing it creatively. Creativity, it comes from within. It draws on different parts of the brain and produces items that we can reflect on to deepen our self-understanding. Our creation is also uniquely ours. Even if we're using a template or we're drawing the same thing, our process in creating it means that we own it, it's ours, and there is meaning not just in the creation itself, but in the process of creating. 7. Social pressure and empathy. Although CAC did not significantly reduce anxiety or loneliness, I want to cover how it might help with this and with empathy. Often people with social anxiety feel a sense of performance socially, and either a phobia of rejection or a fear of social failure. And this can result in an awful lot of internal pressure to be interesting, to say the right thing, and the consequence of this is that the brain is flooded with panic, with anxiety, and it's just not conducive to conversation. Shared activities such as arts and crafts can help with social pressure that contribute towards social anxiety and loneliness by giving that shared activity that you can do in a social setting without the expectation to fill the silences that many with social anxiety will fear. Instead, conversation is secondary, and ironically, putting your attention into the activity makes conversation both more natural and also easier when that pressure to perform has dropped. And on empathy, I quite like modern art. I've no understanding of it, but I like looking at the pieces of work. I see it as an exercise in empathy and emotional intelligence. And the reason that it's good at this is because as you look at the piece of art, you're noticing what it evokes in you, which is intrapersonal empathy, and you're also imagining what the artist might have meant when they were creating it, which is interpersonal empathy. And empathy is built by empathizing with ourselves and also empathizing with others. 8. Senses and doing. Crafts are a multi-sensory experience. The hands are touching, they're feeling, the eyes are looking at what we are creating. Maybe there are smells coming from crafts, like if we are burning wood in pyrography. Perhaps our craft is something in the kitchen, like baking, and we have a tasty little cheeky taste of the icing sugar. Maybe we can hear that satisfying, anger-holding banging of a hammer as we do woodwork. We can realise the position, maybe, of our body when we're finely manipulating clay. Crafting is using every single sense. And they're doing it alongside the planning brain and channeling our feelings into our work. There is a unison of the body. And that's partly why it's so good as a distraction. It's so good for flow. But there are also plenty of folks who have sensory sensitivities where certain senses can easily get dysregulated, and being able to channel our senses into one specific area, just like people do if they stim or with fidget toys, crafting can be grounding as a sensory activity, giving us some control and mastery over our senses. I have a kintsugi kit that I'm really excited about getting a chance to use. It's one of those pottery sets where the pottery is smashed up and you glue it back together again using gold, or in this case a golden coloured resin. And this comes from the Japanese philosophy of Wabi Sabi, which is all about embracing imperfection, the fact that things deteriorate over time and that can actually be considered beautiful. And I bring this up to illustrate the point that perfectionism isn't really possible. Making mistakes is human, and arts and crafts embrace that. We can keep working on a project that we're doing and it will never be perfect. There's always something extra that you can do to finish it. There's a sense of compromise and accepting our ability that comes from crafting and making things, that it doesn't have to be perfect, just as we don't have to be perfect. And acknowledging that it's not always about the finished product, although the finished product is valuable, we might get reflections off the back of it or a sense of accomplishment. Often it's about the process, and all of those things can be really beneficial for our mental health if we embrace imperfection and acknowledge that we're trying. I didn't find any biochemical or psychopharmacological papers on this, but a lot of papers seem to quote that arts and crafts can help with dopamine release. Dopamine being the chemical that is released between our little neuron synapses that fire about in our brain and down our body to say, things are well, we're having a good time, enjoy ourselves. Those same papers also suggest that arts and crafts can help to reduce cortisol, and that is a hormone that our body releases to, amongst other things, stress us out. We have way too much of it in modern society, so get crafting. It might help with arts and crafts to lower that stress. My final point is that there are probably a lot of other points that I have not covered. I think that arts and crafts can be really good for us, and I would be really fascinated if you would like to say in the comments how it helps you with your mental well-being, what you get from crafts, and how it might be able to help somebody else that's struggling. Do, as ever, bear in mind confidentiality, that whatever we post on YouTube is out there in the public eye for people to look at, but genuinely I'd love to read your comments. And finally, thank you so much for watching. My name is Simon. I am a person-centered counsellor based online or in Oxford, and there are lots of other videos on this channel on things such as video gaming, addiction, bereavement, and if we can use a hot cross bun to help us understand ourselves a bit deeper. Do like, subscribe. I produce 3 shorts a week on various different things, including how to make that really cool brain hat made out of paper. And Nikki will be coming on my channel later on the week, the first guest. I'm really looking forward to having her doing a demonstration on mindfulness. And then my plans over the next couple of months or so are to do another video on video game addiction, this time talking a little bit more about the dangers of it. And I might make a video on some lessons learned from doing 1,000 hours of client work. We are getting very close to that figure. And on that note, if you have listened to this and anything has come up from you for you, and you are interested in pursuing counselling, then feel free to get in touch. My website is www.simonslistening.co.uk. You can find me on Facebook at Simon's Listening Counselling Services. You can email me on simonslistening@protonmail.com, and my number is 077 498 70502. If you are considering counselling in seriousness, I would love to journey with you. And however you communicate, whether it's with crafts or video games or with other interests, whether you are more cognitive, whether you are more emotional, whether you are more metaphorical, however you communicate, I would love to journey with you. Thank you.